2 days before my wedding, my father called me while I was sitting on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by ivory place cards, half-tied ribbon, and a guest list I had rewritten so many times the paper had started to tear at the corners. I remember the exact sound of his voice because it was not angry. Anger would have been easier. Anger would have meant he cared enough to lose control. My father, Kenneth Ellison, sounded calm, polished, almost bored. "Mara," he said, "I'm not walking you down the aisle." I stared at the seating chart in my lap. My fiancé, Julian, was in the kitchen, testing the little speakers we were going to use for the rehearsal dinner playlist. I could hear some old jazz song playing too softly through the wall, the kind of music that made our cheap apartment feel warmer than it was. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear. What I said, "I'm not walking you down the aisle." For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood him. Not because my father had ever been gentle with me, but because there are certain cruelties you don't expect even from people who have practiced cruelty your whole life. 2 days before my wedding, not 2 months, not 2 weeks, 2 days, my dress was hanging in the bedroom closet. My vows were folded inside a book on the nightstand. My shoes were still in the box with tissue paper wrapped around them like something precious. And my father was telling me, in the same voice he used to order coffee, that he would not be giving me away. "Dad," I said carefully, "the program is already printed." He sighed, and somehow that sigh made me feel 12 years old again. "It's not about the program. What is it about?" There was a pause. Then he said, "Your sister says it would hurt her." I closed my eyes. Of course. Brinley. It always came back to Brinley. Brinley cried, and rooms rearranged themselves. Brinley felt overlooked, and everyone dimmed the lights around me. Brinley had a headache, and my graduation dinner got canceled. Brinley needed attention, and my birthday cake was served with her name accidentally written on it in pink frosting, while my mother laughed and said, "Well, you girls are basically the same to us. We were not the same. Brinley was my parents' delicate miracle. I was their obligation." "What does my wedding aisle have to do with Brinley?" I asked. My father lowered his voice, as if he were the reasonable one. "She feels like this wedding has become too centered on you." I looked down at the ivory cards scattered around me, names of aunts who never called me, cousins who had watched me grow up like furniture in the corner, family friends who loved my mother's Christmas newsletters but never asked why I stopped appearing in the photos after I turned 16. "My wedding is centered on me," I said. "Mara, don't twist this. I'm not twisting anything. She's been struggling," he said. "You know that." Brinley was 26 years old, married to a real estate agent, living in a house my parents helped her buy, driving a car my father co-signed for, and posting photos of herself crying in parked cars whenever someone else received attention for more than 12 minutes. But she was always struggling. When I struggled, I was difficult. When Brinley struggled, the family held a meeting. She told us watching me walk you down the aisle would make her feel like I had chosen you. My mouth went dry. Chosen you. As if once in my life, my father standing beside me in public would be an act of violence against her. I heard my mother in the background then, her voice muffled but sharp. "Tell her she can walk herself. It's not a big deal." My father repeated it like an instruction. "Your mother says you can walk yourself. It's not a big deal." Something in me went very still. Not broken, not loud, still. I stared at one place card with my grandmother's name on it. Evelyn Ellison. She had died when I was 14, and for years I thought she was the only person in that house who saw me clearly. She used to tuck $5 bills into my coat pocket and whisper, "For when they forget, you need lunch too," after she died. My mother boxed up her things before the funeral flowers had even wilted. I never saw her journals. I never saw the old photographs. I never saw the letters she used to keep tied with blue ribbon in her desk. And every time I asked about them, my father would say, "Stop digging through dead people's business." I looked at her name on the seating chart. Then I looked at my own, Mara Ellison, for 29 years. That name had felt less like belonging and more like a receipt for something I never agreed to purchase. "Okay," I said. My father paused. He had expected crying, begging. Maybe some trembling little speech where I promised Brinley could have a special toast, or a better seat, or a bigger role if he would just stand beside me for 90 seconds. Okay, he repeated. Yes, you understand, I understand exactly. He exhaled, satisfied. Good. Your mother and I still plan to attend. Of course, we don't want drama. That almost made me laugh. They never wanted drama. They only wanted obedience with no sound effects. Will Brinley still be wearing the pale blue dress, I asked. He hesitated. What, the one she bought after I told her my bridesmaids were wearing sage? The dress that looks almost white in photos. Mara, I'm just asking. Don't start. I'm not starting anything. My mother's voice sharpened in the background. She's being selfish again. Kenneth, I told you she would make this about herself. My father came back on the line. You need to be gracious for once. For once. I was the child who gave up my bedroom when Brinley wanted more closet space. I was the teenager who worked double shifts at a grocery store because my parents said college was not in the budget. Then watched them pay for Brinley's private art retreat because she needed inspiration. I was the daughter who drove my mother to her surgery appointments, organized my father's insurance files, cleaned out my grandmother's apartment, and smiled in every family photo where Brinley stood in the center. But I needed to be gracious. I hung up without saying goodbye. Julian appeared in the doorway a second later, holding a dish towel in one hand. His face changed when he saw me. What happened? I opened my mouth, but for a second nothing came out. Then I said, My father's not walking me down the aisle. Julian went very quiet. He did not rush to fill the silence. That was one of the first things I loved about him. My family treated silence like a courtroom where I was always guilty. Julian treated silence like a room where I was allowed to breathe. He sat down beside me on the floor. Why I smiled, but it came out wrong. Brinley says it would hurt her. Julian closed his eyes, only for a second, but long enough. When he opened them again, there was something steady and dangerous in his face. Your sister is not the bride. No, I said, but in my family, she's always the event. He reached for my hand. You don't have to walk alone. I know. I'll meet you halfway if you want. I shook my head. That's not how it works. Then we change how it works. I wanted to believe it could be that simple. But weddings are strange. They are supposed to be about love, but they have a way of becoming mirrors. People show up dressed nicely, smiling over champagne, and suddenly, every old fracture in a family starts glowing under soft lights. I had spent months pretending my wedding would be different. I told myself my mother would not criticize the flowers. She did. I told myself Brinley would not try on dresses in bridal white and send me photos asking, "Too much." She did. I told myself my father would at least perform decency in public. He would not. And somehow, even after 29 years of being taught to expect very little, I still felt embarrassed by how much it hurt. That night, I did not sleep. At 1:17 in the morning, while Julian breathed beside me and the city hummed outside our window, I sat at our kitchen table and opened the old cedar box my grandmother had left me. It was the only thing of hers I had. My father gave it to me 6 months after her funeral, not because he wanted to, but because my Aunt Laurel had asked, in front of people, whether I had received Evelyn's box. His face had gone tight. Then he handed it over 2 days later and said, "It's just junk." For years, I kept it closed because I was afraid of wanting whatever was inside too much. That night, with my father's words still burning in my ear, I opened it. Inside were brittle postcards, a silver thimble, 3 recipe cards written in my grandmother's neat, slanted handwriting, and a stack of photographs tied with a ribbon that had faded from blue to gray. At the bottom was a small envelope I had never noticed before. My name was written on it. Not Mara, Marigold. Only my grandmother had called me that. I slid my finger under the flap. Inside was a photograph of my mother when she was young, standing beside a man I did not recognize. He was tall, dark-haired, with one hand resting lightly on the back of a hospital chair. My mother was holding a newborn wrapped in a yellow blanket. On the back, my grandmother had written Mara, 3 days old. Thomas never stopped asking. I read it once, then again, Thomas. I did not know any Thomas. Under the photograph was a folded letter. The paper shook in my hands before I even opened it. My dearest Marigold, if this ever reaches you, it means I failed to tell you while I was alive. I am sorry. There are truths adults bury and call protection. This was not protection. Your mother was married before Kenneth. His name was Thomas Calder. He is your father. I stopped breathing. Not dramatically, not with a gasp. My body simply forgot what came next. I read the line again. He is your father. The kitchen seemed to tilt. For as long as I could remember, my father had been Kenneth Ellison. Cold, proud, impossible to please Kenneth. The man who taught me to ride a bike by letting go too soon and then calling me clumsy when I hit the curb. The man who signed birthday cards Dad in handwriting so sharp it looked engraved. The man who looked through me at dinner unless he needed someone to refill the water pitcher. Thomas Calder was a stranger, a name on old paper, a man in a photograph standing beside my mother and my newborn body. I forced myself to keep reading. Your mother told Thomas you died. I covered my mouth. The words blurred. She told him there were complications. She told him not to come to the hospital. She allowed Kenneth to handle the arrangements. By the time Thomas discovered there had been no funeral, your mother and Kenneth had already filed papers. I did not know until later, when I confronted her. She said Thomas was unstable and that Kenneth was the better father for you. I tried to find proof. I tried to reach Thomas. Your grandfather threatened to cut everyone off if I exposed it. I was a coward longer than I can forgive. But Thomas sent letters every year until you were 7. Kenneth returned them unopened. There is one more thing. My will had a provision for you, a separate education trust. Kenneth told the attorney you were not emotionally fit to receive it at 18. Celeste supported him. The money was redirected into a family housing account. Ask Laurel. She knows where the paper trail starts. Forgive me, baby. You were never unwanted, Evelyn. By the time I finished reading, I was crying so quietly I could hear the refrigerator click on. Not because of Kenneth refusing the aisle. Not anymore. That was just the final insult on top of a burial site. My whole life shifted backward. Every moment I had blamed myself for being hard to love suddenly stood in a different light. Maybe Kenneth had not failed to love his daughter. Maybe he had punished another man's child. I sat there until dawn with the letter in front of me and the photograph beside it. At 6:03, I called Aunt Laurel. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice rough with sleep. Mara, I found Grandma's letter. Silence. Then a soft inhale. Oh, honey. I did not cry then. Her tone told me everything before she did. You knew I knew pieces. Did everyone know pieces, Mara? Did my father know? She did not ask which father. That told me even more. Yes. The word landed like a door closing. I looked toward the bedroom where Julian was still asleep. Is Thomas Calder alive? Another pause. Yes. My fingers tightened around the phone. Where is he, Mara? This is not a conversation for the phone. Where is he? Aunt Laurel. She breathed out slowly. He lives 40 minutes outside the city, in Briar Glen. He owns a small restoration shop. Antique furniture. Mostly. A laugh broke out of me. Not because it was funny. Because for years, when I was stressed, I refinished old furniture from thrift stores, sanding, staining, repairing broken legs, bringing dead wood back to life. My mother called it a dirty little hobby. Kenneth said it was the kind of thing people did when they had no real ambition. And somewhere 40 minutes away, my real father restored old things for a living. Does he know about me? I asked. Aunt Laurel's voice cracked. He knows you lived. Eventually. But by then, your mother had threatened legal action, and Kenneth had an order drawn up saying Thomas had harassed the family. I don't know all of it. I only know he tried. Mara. I pressed my palm against my chest. He tried. For years. That was the first receipt. Not money, not a bank statement, a grandmother's letter and a photograph with the truth written on the back. But by noon, Aunt Laurel gave me the second. She came to my apartment wearing sunglasses and carrying a manila folder so old the edges had softened. Julian made coffee no one drank. Aunt Laurel sat across from me and opened the folder carefully, like the papers inside could still explode. There were copies of returned letters, birthday cards addressed to Marigold Calder, a small envelope with a yellowed hospital bracelet, a certified mail receipt from when I was 5, a legal notice Kenneth had sent Thomas demanding he cease contact with the minor child known as Mara Ellison, known as, not born as, known as. Then Aunt Laurel placed one final page in front of me. It was a photocopy of a trust document from my grandmother. My name was there. Mara Rose Calder, also known as Mara Rose Ellison, beneficiary, Education and Independence Trust. Amount at time of creation, $86,000. Current distribution date, age 18. I stared at the number, not because I cared about the money more than the lie, but because of what that money would have meant. It would have meant not working 2 jobs through college. It would have meant not crying in a financial aid office when my tuition balance almost got me dropped from classes. It would have meant not wearing crack shoes to my first hospital job interview, because Kenneth said, "Adults figure things out." I looked up at Aunt Laurel. What happened to it? Her lips pressed together. Kenneth petitioned to redirect it, on what grounds he claimed you had behavioral instability and that the funds would be safer in a managed family housing account. Julian stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. I did not move. What housing account? Aunt Laurel looked ashamed. The down payment on the Maple Ridge house. Brinley's house. The one with the white shutters and the pale blue kitchen. The one my parents helped her buy the year I was eating instant noodles in a studio apartment with a broken heater. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then Julian said, very softly, "They used her trust to buy her sister a house." Aunt Laurel nodded. And there it was, the real aisle. Not the one in the church, the one that had run through my entire life. On one side, Brinley, protected, funded, centered. On the other, me, told to be grateful for scraps stolen from my own plate. Before I tell you what happened when I found Thomas, I want you to imagine this for 1 second if you discovered 2 days before your wedding that the man refusing to walk you down the aisle had also helped erase your real father from your life. What would you do first? Because I did not do the noble thing right away. I did the human thing. I sat on my bathroom floor and shook so hard I could barely breathe. Julian found me there. He did not tell me to calm down. He did not tell me weddings were stressful. He sat beside me on the tile in his work pants and pressed his shoulder against mine. "We can cancel," he said. I shook my head. "We can postpone." "No." "Mara." "No," I said again. "They don't get to take this too." His jaw tightened. "Then what do you want?" I looked at the letter in my hand. "I want to meet him." Thomas Calder's restoration shop sat on a quiet street between a bakery and an old hardware store. The sign above the door was hand-painted, dark green with gold lettering, Calder Restoration Wood, frame, and family pieces, family pieces. That nearly broke me before I even got inside. The bell over the door rang when I entered. The shop smelled like cedar, varnish, dust, and sunlight. Half-finished chairs stood along one wall. An old piano bench rested upside down on a work table. There were framed photographs behind the counter landscapes. Dogs, a young man in a baseball cap, an older woman I did not recognize. Then a man stepped out from the back room wiping his hands on a cloth. He was older than in the photograph. Of course. His dark hair had gone silver at the temples. His face was lined, but not hard. He wore a denim shirt with rolled sleeves, and when he saw me, the cloth slipped from his hand for a moment. Neither of us spoke. His eyes moved over my face like he was afraid to look too quickly. Then he whispered, "Marigold, no one had called me that since my grandmother died." I started crying before I could answer. Thomas gripped the edge of the counter. "My God," he said. "My God." I had imagined this moment badly 100 different ways during the drive. I thought he might deny it. I thought he might ask for proof. I thought he might be distant or confused or polite. Instead, he came around the counter and stopped a few feet away from me like he did not believe he had the right to come closer. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice broke on the second word. "I'm so sorry." That was when I knew. Whatever else had been stolen, grief had lived in him too. I held out my grandmother's photograph. His hand trembled when he took it. He looked at the back first, at Evelyn's handwriting, then at the image of himself, my mother, and me. He covered his mouth. I held you for 11 minutes, he said. I could barely hear him. What? At the hospital. Your mother was asleep. Evelyn let me hold you. 11 minutes. He laughed once, painfully. I counted because I thought I had the rest of my life. I pressed my fingers against my lips. They told you I died. He nodded. At first, and later his face changed. Later, they told me you were Kenneth's. They told me Celeste had lied about the dates. Then when I pushed, Kenneth sent legal papers saying I was frightening your mother. He had friends in the county clerk's office. I was 24 and broke and stupid enough to believe a man in a suit could erase me if he wanted to. He looked at me, but I never stopped looking. He walked to a cabinet and unlocked the bottom drawer. Inside was a narrow wooden box. He placed it on the counter and opened it. Birthday cards, photographs cut from newspaper clippings, a printed article from when I made the dean's list in college, a hospital newsletter with my picture circled in blue ink. You were in the county paper when you won that scholarship, he said. I bought 6 copies. I could not speak. He touched the edge of the newsletter carefully. I thought maybe if you ever wanted me, you'd find me. But I was scared to force my way into your life and have them punish you for it. The worst part was that he had been right. They would have. Kenneth would have made me pay for being wanted by someone else. My wedding is tomorrow, I said. Thomas went still. I know. You know. He looked embarrassed. Laurel called me last month. She said you were getting married. She didn't tell me to come. Just thought I should know. I swallowed. My father refused to walk me down the aisle. Pain flickered across his face before he could hide it. Why my sister said it would hurt her. Thomas closed his eyes. When he opened them, there was no bitterness in his expression, only a sadness so old it had learned manners. I'm sorry, Mara. I looked at him standing there, this stranger with my eyes, this man who had saved newspaper clippings and counted 11 minutes as fatherhood. Then I asked the question before fear could stop me. Would you walk me? He did not answer immediately. His face folded, not dramatically, quietly, like a man trying not to reach for something that might disappear. You don't owe me that, he said. I know. I haven't earned it. You tried. That is not the same as being there. No, I said. It's not. He nodded once, accepting the truth like he deserved it. But he was there. I continued, and he made sure I felt alone anyway. Thomas looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the moment he understood that I was not asking him to replace 29 years. I was asking him to stand beside me for the first honest 90 seconds of my life. His voice came out rough. Yes, he said. If you want me there, yes. The next morning, my wedding day arrived gray and warm, with rain threatening but not falling. My mother texted at 7:12. Remember, no drama today. Brinley is sensitive. At 7:14, Brinley texted a mirror selfie in her pale blue dress. Do you think this photograph's too white? Mom says it's fine? I stared at both messages while my makeup artist pinned my hair. Then I turned my phone face down. There are days when silence is weakness. There are other days when silence is a blade you keep clean until the right moment. My dress was simple. No heavy train, no glittering princess skirt, just ivory satin with long sleeves and a low back. The kind of dress my mother said was plain because she believed beauty had to announce its price. When I looked in the mirror, I did not see plain. I saw a woman who had survived being edited out of her own family. Aunt Laurel arrived at the bridal suite carrying a garment bag. Inside was a small handkerchief embroidered with blue flowers. Your grandmother made it, she said. She meant to give it to you one day. I held it carefully. Did she know Thomas would come? Aunt Laurel smiled sadly. I think she hoped Truth would find better timing than she did. At noon. Julian knocked on the bridal suite door, even though tradition said he wasn't supposed to see me. I'm not looking, he called. I opened the door a crack. He stood facing the hallway wall with one hand over his eyes. I just need to hear your voice, he said. I almost laughed. I'm here. Are you okay? No. Are we still getting married? Yes. Good. then I'm okay enough for both of us. I leaned my forehead against the doorframe. My real father is walking me. He lowered his hand, not enough to see me, just enough to stop pretending tradition mattered more than this moment. Good, he said. That's all, Mara. I would marry you in a parking lot beside a vending machine. I don't care who walks you, as long as you reach me. My throat tightened. I love you. I love you more than your family fears accountability. That did make me laugh, and I needed that laugh more than I can explain. The church filled by 3. My parents arrived at 3:17. I know because Aunt Laurel told me later. My father wore a dark suit and a silver tie, looking exactly like the kind of man strangers trusted with keys and signatures. My mother wore champagne silk, even though she had asked me 3 times what color the mothers were supposed to avoid. Brinley arrived between them in that pale blue dress, holding her husband's arm like she was entering a red carpet event instead of her sister's wedding. She had her hair swept up with pearl pins. Pearl pins. At my wedding. My mother kissed cheeks in the vestibule and told people I was a little emotional today. My father shook hands. Brinley dabbed at the corner of her eye before anything had happened. People noticed. People always noticed Brinley's tears. They rarely asked who handed her the waterworks. At 3:42, my father came to the bridal suite door. Aunt Laurel opened it just enough to block him. Kenneth, I need to speak to Mara. I stood behind her in my dress. He looked past my aunt and saw me. For 1 second, something like surprise moved across his face. Not love, not pride. Surprise. As if he had forgotten I could look like someone worth seeing. What do you need? I asked. His expression tightened. I want to make sure you're not planning some embarrassing stunt. I almost smiled. You mean walking alone? His eyes flicked to Aunt Laurel. Don't be dramatic. That's funny coming from the man who canceled on his daughter 2 days before her wedding. His jaw hardened. I made a difficult decision to protect family harmony. Whose family? He stared at me. I saw it then. A small shift, a calculation. He did not know what I knew. Not yet. That was the only reason he was still standing upright. You should be careful today, he said quietly. Aunt Laurel stiffened. Careful? Kenneth lowered his voice so only I could hear. You have always had a habit of turning small disappointments into performances. Don't ruin your own wedding trying to punish us. Something cold moved through me. For years, that tone had worked. It had made me shrink, apologize, soften my language, make excuses for him before anyone even accused him. But that day, in my wedding dress, holding my grandmother's handkerchief, I looked at Kenneth Ellison and felt nothing but clarity. You're right, I said. He blinked. I won't ruin anything. He studied me. Suspicious. Good. Then he glanced at Aunt Laurel. And I hope certain people remember this is not the day to dig up old grievances. Aunt Laurel's voice was quiet. No. Kenneth, it's the day they walk themselves into the room. He did not understand, but his face changed anyway. Maybe guilt has instincts even when it has no conscience. He left. At 3:58, I stood behind the closed church doors. The music began. My bridesmaids walked first, then the flower girl, Julian's niece, who dropped petals in uneven clumps and looked very proud of herself. From behind the doors, I could hear the guests shifting. I could imagine my father sitting in the back row, performing Wounded Dignity, my mother beside him, whispering commentary behind her program. Brinley probably angled toward the aisle, ready to lower her lashes at just the right moment. Then Thomas stepped beside me. He wore a navy suit that looked recently pressed and slightly unfamiliar on him. His silver hair was combed back. In his breast pocket was the yellow hospital bracelet Aunt Laurel had found in the folder, tucked safely inside a clear sleeve no one else could see. He looked terrified. So did I. You can still change your mind, he whispered. I looked up at him. Can you? His eyes filled. No. I placed my hand on his arm. His breath shook once. Behind the doors, the music changed. Everyone stood. This is the part where most brides think about not tripping, or whether everyone is looking, or whether the flowers are straight. I thought about a man counting 11 minutes in a hospital room. I thought about returned birthday cards. I thought about a grandmother who tried too late but still tried. I thought about every time Kenneth made me feel like asking for love was asking for too much. Then the doors opened, and the entire church saw Thomas Calder holding my arm. The gasp did not come all at once. It moved, first from Aunt Laurel's side of the family, then from the older guests who recognized him, then from my mother's table, then from the back row. Someone whispered, "Is that Thomas?" Someone else said, "Oh my God." My mother's face drained so quickly it looked like the lights had changed. Brinley turned toward her, confused, still performing sadness until she realized the room had stopped watching her. And my father, Kenneth Ellison, who had refused to walk me down the aisle because my sister's feelings were too fragile, went pale in front of everyone, not white with surprise, gray with recognition. Thomas kept his eyes forward. His arm under my hand was steady now. Mine was not. Halfway down the aisle, I looked at Julian. He was standing at the altar with tears in his eyes. Not shocked tears, not pity, pride. He knew exactly what it had cost me to take those steps. When we reached the front, the minister smiled gently and asked, "Who presents this woman?" That was the moment my father leaned forward in the back row. I saw it from the corner of my eye, a small, desperate movement, as if after refusing the role. He still expected the script to protect him. Thomas looked at me. I nodded. His voice carried through the church. "Her father does." The room went silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that has weight. My mother gripped the pew in front of her. Brinley whispered, "What Kenneth stood, he actually stood." "Kenneth!" my mother hissed. But he was already stepping into the aisle. "This is inappropriate," he said. Every head turned. The minister froze. Julian took one step forward, but I lifted my hand slightly. "Not yet." Kenneth's face was tight, his voice low but loud enough. "This man has no right to be here." Thomas did not move. I turned slowly. My wedding dress whispered against the floor. For 29 years, my father had counted on my fear of public embarrassment. He believed I would swallow any humiliation to keep the room comfortable. He had forgotten who taught me how much humiliation I could survive. "Actually," I said, "he has more right than you." A ripple moved through the guests. Kenneth's eyes sharpened. "Mara." "No," I said. "You don't get to use that voice today." My mother stood then, smiling too brightly. "Sweetheart, emotions are very high. Let's not confuse people." Aunt Laurel rose from her pew. "Celeste, sit down." My mother looked like she had been slapped. Brinley stood too, because she could not bear a room moving without her. "What is happening?" she demanded. "Why is everyone acting weird?" And maybe it was cruel that I looked at her then. Maybe she was not responsible for everything, but she had accepted the throne my parents built out of my absence. She had worn it comfortably. She had asked me to shrink at my own wedding because seeing me loved made her uncomfortable. So I answered her, "What's happening is that Dad refused to walk me down the aisle because you said it would hurt your feelings." People turned toward Brinley. For once, attention did not flatter her. Her mouth opened. "I didn't say it like that," my father snapped. "This is not the time." I looked back at him. "You're right. The time was 29 years ago, when Mom told my real father I died." The gasp that went through the church this time was louder. My mother made a sound like my name had cut her. Kenneth's face changed from pale to furious. "That is a vicious lie." Thomas reached into his jacket pocket. "I wish it were." He did not raise his voice. He did not perform. He simply unfolded a copy of my grandmother's letter and held it out to the minister, then to Julian's father, who happened to be a retired county clerk. Julian's father took it, read the first page, and his expression hardened. Then Aunt Laurel stepped into the aisle with the folder. "I have returned letters," she said. "Certified mail receipts, the hospital bracelet, and the trust documents Evelyn left for Mara." My mother whispered, "Laurel, don't." Aunt Laurel looked at her sister with 30 years of disgust in her eyes. "You should have thought of that before you let him steal from her." Brinley went still. "Steal from who?" No one answered immediately. So Aunt Laurel did. The education trust your grandmother left Mara helped buy your house. Brinley's husband, Callum, turned to look at her. What house? Her face flushed. Our house, she whispered. Callum stared. Your parents said that was a gift. It was, Brinley said quickly. Aunt Laurel's voice cut through the church. It was Mara's. There are moments when a family collapses in one dramatic explosion. This was not one of those. This collapse happened in phases. Callum stepping away from Brinley by half a foot. My mother lowering herself back into the pew because her knees had stopped trusting her. My father looking around and realizing there were too many witnesses to control. Old friends whispering behind programs. My uncle removing his glasses and rubbing his forehead. Julian's mother placing one hand over her mouth, not in gossip, but in horror. And me standing at the altar in my wedding dress, finally watching the room shift around the truth instead of around Brinley's feelings. Kenneth pointed at Thomas. You abandoned her. Thomas looked at him. I buried a child I was told was dead. The words landed so hard even Kenneth stopped. Thomas's voice shook now, but he did not look away. I sent cards. You returned them. I came to the house twice. You threatened me with police. I hired an attorney I could barely afford. And suddenly there was a complaint saying I had unstable behavior around a minor child. You used your position, your friends, and her mother's fear of shame to erase me. My mother whispered. I was young. Thomas turned to her. So was I. That broke something in the room, because it was simple. No dramatic speech, no screaming, just 4 words that stripped away her favorite excuse. Kenneth tried one more time. Mara, if you continue this, you will regret it. I looked at him and felt the last thread snap. No, I said. I regret believing you were hard on me because I was difficult to love. I regret apologizing every time Brinley cried on command. I regret letting Mom call my pain selfish. I regret thinking blood made you my father when all you ever did was manage my silence. He stared at me. I lifted my chin. But I will not regret this. Then Julian came to stand beside me. He did not take over. He did not rescue me. He simply stood where he had promised to stand for the rest of our lives. The minister looked at me carefully. Mara, he asked, do you wish to continue? I looked at Thomas, then at Julian, then at the guests, the flowers, the candles, the stunned faces of people who had accepted my family's version of me because it was easier than asking questions. Yes, I said, I do. Kenneth remained standing in the aisle. Julian's father stepped forward. Kenneth, he said, sit down or leave. Kenneth blinked. He was not used to other men correcting him in public, especially not calmly, especially not with witnesses. My mother touched his sleeve. Kenneth, please. But this time her plea was not for me. It was for herself, for her image, for the fragile little glass house she had decorated with lies. Kenneth looked toward the doors, then toward the pews, then toward me, and for 1 second, I saw the truth. He had never expected me to become someone who could survive without his approval. He sat down, not because he respected me, because the room had stopped obeying him. Thomas stepped back to his place. The minister took a breath. The ceremony continued. My vows were not the ones I had written. The folded paper stayed in Julian's jacket pocket. When the time came, I looked at the man I loved and spoke from the only honest place left in me. Julian. I spent most of my life thinking love was something I had to earn by becoming easier to choose. I thought if I stayed quiet enough, helpful enough, forgiving enough, someone would finally look at me without seeing a burden. His eyes shone. But you loved me loudly in quiet rooms. You believed me before I had proof. You stood beside me without asking me to make my pain smaller so you could be comfortable. Today, I am not walking away from my family because of anger. I am walking toward the first family that ever felt safe. Julian wiped his cheek. Then he said his vows with a shaking voice and both hands around mine. When the minister pronounced us married, the church erupted. Not everyone. My parents did not clap. Brinley did not clap. But the sound that rose around us was enough. Thomas cried openly when Julian kissed me, and I let myself cry too. At the reception, my parents tried to leave quietly. They did not make it past the coat room. Callum stopped Brinley near the hallway. I was not close enough to hear everything, but I saw his face. Not angry, worse, awake. Brinley was crying, but her tears were no longer controlling the room. They were just wet evidence on her cheeks. My mother stood near the champagne table with two women from her garden club, both of whom had suddenly remembered appointments elsewhere. Kenneth took calls outside under the portico, pacing with one hand in his pocket. At 7:15, Aunt Laurel came to my table. "Your father wants to speak with you." I looked across the room. Kenneth was watching me through the glass doors. For years. That look would have pulled me out of any celebration. I would have gone to him. I would have listened. I would have explained myself kindly while he punished me with disappointment. But my wedding dinner was warm in front of me. My husband's hand was on my knee. My real father was sitting 2 tables away, laughing softly at something Julian's little niece had said, while still wiping his eyes every few minutes like joy was too bright. "No," I said. Aunt Laurel smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." A few minutes later, my mother approached instead. She stood beside my chair, her champagne silk dress catching the light. "Mara," she said softly, "can we not do this here?" I looked up at her. Do what punish me? That was almost impressive, even exposed. She found a way to climb into the victim's chair. "I'm not punishing you," I said. "I'm getting married." Her mouth tightened. "You don't understand what it was like." "No," I said, "I don't. Because no one ever told me the truth." Her eyes flicked toward Thomas. "He was not the man you think he is. Maybe not," I said. "But you never let me find out. I made choices to protect you. You told a man his baby died." Her face crumpled. But even then, I could not tell whether it was guilt or fear of being seen. Kenneth said it was best. "There it is," I said quietly. She blinked. "What?" "The sentence you built my childhood on." She looked confused. I stood, not quickly, not dramatically, just enough to meet her eye to eye. "Kenneth said it was best when you returned the letters. Kenneth said it was best when you let him redirect my trust. Kenneth said it was best when I worked through school while Brinley lived in a house bought with my future. Kenneth said it was best when Dad canceled on me 2 days before my wedding because Brinley felt uncomfortable." My mother swallowed. "You sound cruel." "No," I said. "I sound finished." Behind her, Brinley appeared. Her mascara had run slightly, and she looked younger than usual without confidence arranged around her. "Did you know she asked my mother?" My mother stiffened. "Brinley, not now." "Did you know the house money was Mara's?" My mother's silence answered. Brinley looked at me then, for the first time all day. There was no performance in her face, just shock, maybe shame, maybe only fear that the golden floor beneath her had finally cracked. "I didn't know," she said. I believed her, and somehow that did not fix anything. "Now you do," I said. Callum stood behind her, his expression unreadable. Brinley hugged her arms around herself. "Are you going to sue us?" It was such a Brinley question, not, "Are you okay?" Not, "What did they take from you?" Not, "How could they?" "Are you going to sue us?" Julian stood beside me. "We have an attorney reviewing the documents," he said. My mother's head snapped toward him. "You already hired someone." Julian's voice stayed calm. "No. Mara did. That mattered. I wanted her to hear it. Not my husband rescuing me. Me choosing myself." My mother looked at me like she was seeing a stranger. Good. Maybe I had always been one. The reception did not recover in the normal way, but it became something better than normal. People who loved us danced. People who felt guilty stayed awkwardly seated. People who had questions learned to keep them gentle. Thomas and I danced to a song we did not choose. The DJ announced a father-daughter dance because no one had told him not to. For one horrible second, I thought the room might collapse again. Thomas looked ready to step away. I held out my hand. 11 minutes, I said. His face broke. He took my hand. We did not dance well. He apologized twice for stepping on my dress. I laughed both times. Halfway through the song, he said, "I don't expect you to call me Dad. I looked at his shoulder because looking at his face was too much. I don't know what I'll call you. That's okay. I'm angry. You should be. Not just at them. He nodded slowly. At me too. I looked up. He did not defend himself. That was new. Every adult in my life had treated my pain like an accusation they had to defeat. Thomas just held it. I should have fought harder, he said. Maybe. I was scared. I was a child. His eyes filled again. I know. And strangely, that helped more than an excuse would have. By the end of the song, I was crying again, but this time it did not feel like being broken open. It felt like something frozen beginning to thaw, painfully, with water everywhere. Later that night, after the cake had been cut and the guests had started drifting out, Kenneth approached me one last time. Julian was across the room speaking with the venue manager. Thomas was near the exit with Aunt Laurel. My mother had disappeared into the restroom 20 minutes earlier and had not returned. Kenneth stopped 2 feet away. You think today made you powerful, he said. I looked at him. There he was, the real man under the suit. No witnesses close enough to impress. No audience left to charm. You embarrassed your mother, he continued. You humiliated your sister. You let a stranger turn you against your family. I felt tired then, not scared, not even angry, just tired in the deep way you feel when you finally stop carrying someone else's version of you. Thomas didn't turn me against you, I said. He just stood where you refused to. His jaw tightened. You'll come back when this little fantasy falls apart. No, you don't know that. I do. He gave a short laugh. You've always been dramatic, and you've always mistaken damage for drama. That landed. I saw it. His eyes flickered. Then he said the sentence he had probably come to say all along. You are not my daughter, for most of my life. That would have destroyed me. That night, under fading reception lights, with my wedding bouquet lying on the table and my husband's ring warm on my finger, it felt like a door unlocking. I stepped closer. You're right. His face changed. I smiled sadly. I'm not. Then I walked past him. Outside. The rain had finally started. Soft rain, warm rain, the kind that turns streetlights blurry and makes everything look less certain. Julian found me under the awning a minute later. You okay? I leaned into him. No. He kissed the top of my head. Fair. Thomas stepped outside too, holding his coat over one arm, for a second. The three of us stood there listening to the rain, my old life inside, my unknown life outside. Then Thomas said, I have something for you. He handed me a small wrapped package. The paper was simple brown craft paper tied with string. I made it years ago, he said. I didn't know if I'd ever give it to you. Inside was a small wooden picture frame, hand-carved, delicate flowers along the edge. Marigolds. In the frame was a blank space. I thought, he said, voice rough, maybe one day you'd have a picture worth putting in it. I held the frame against my chest. Behind us, through the glass doors, I could see Kenneth standing alone near the empty dance floor. My mother was beside him now. Brinley sat at a table with her husband, not touching him, for the first time. They looked small, not because I had made them small, because I had stopped making them large. 6 months later, the legal process was still moving, slowly, painfully, with more documents than I thought one family lie could produce. Kenneth hired an attorney who used words like misunderstanding and emotional context. My attorney used words like misrepresentation, concealment, and unlawful conversion of trust assets. Brinley and Callum put the Maple Ridge house on the market. Their marriage did not survive the listing. My mother sent 3 letters. The first blamed Kenneth. The second blamed her youth. The third asked if we could meet for coffee without lawyers or old bitterness. I did not answer any of them. Thomas and I did not become magically whole. Life is not that cheap. We met for breakfast on Sundays sometimes. We were awkward. We told stories in the wrong order. He learned I hated olives and loved old bookstores. I learned he drank terrible coffee, cried at dog commercials, and still had every returned card in a fireproof box. Once, he asked if he could show me how to repair a split chair leg. I told him I already knew. He grinned. Show me anyway. So I did, and in his workshop, with sawdust in the sunlight and clamps lying neatly on the bench. We worked side by side like two people restoring something that had not been broken by accident. A year after the wedding, Julian and I moved into a small house with green shutters and a kitchen that caught morning light. Not a mansion, not a revenge fantasy. A home. On our first night there, we ate takeout on the floor because the table had not arrived yet. The hand-carved marigold frame sat on the windowsill. Inside it was a photograph from the wedding. Not the formal one, not the perfect one. It was a picture Aunt Laurel had taken from the side of the church aisle. The doors were open. The guests were standing. My face was turned toward the altar. Thomas was beside me, holding my arm, and in the back row, blurred but unmistakable, Kenneth Ellison was pale, frozen, and finally seeing what happened when the daughter he refused to claim was claimed by the truth. People ask me sometimes if I regret exposing everything at my wedding. They ask it carefully, as if truth has bad manners. I tell them this. My father refused to walk me down the aisle because he thought that aisle belonged to him. He thought he could give me away or withhold himself like a gift. But that aisle was never his. It was the road between the lie I inherited and the life I chose. And on the day he refused to stand beside me, the man he helped erase took my arm instead. Everyone gasped. My father went pale. And I finally walked towards someone who was waiting for me, not someone deciding whether I deserved to be chosen.